Human beings fear the unknown more than anything else. That fear has shaped everything, from how we built our societies to how we imagined the universe. When ancient people looked around, they saw a world they couldn't explain. Lightning, disease, death, the movement of stars, everything seemed unpredictable and dangerous. So they built stories to make sense of it, stories that made chaos feel controlled, stories that turned ignorance into order. That's how religion was born, not from divine revelation, but from the human mind's refusal to live without answers. Early civilizations didn't have science. They didn't have medicine, astronomy, or psychology. When crops failed, they didn't study soil. They prayed. When it rained, they thanked invisible powers. Every natural event became personal, an intentional act of unseen forces. Religion began as humanity's first attempt to explain reality, a primitive science fueled by imagination and emotion. But it didn't stay innocent for long. Once belief became organized, it became power. The moment one person claimed to speak for the gods, hierarchy was born. Priests, shamans, kings, and prophets discovered that divine authority was the strongest form of control. You can question a leader, but you can't question a god. Religion became the perfect system to command obedience without visible force, a moral surveillance network long before the invention of cameras. It told people what to eat, what to wear, who to marry, and what to fear. It offered reward and punishment not just in life, but after death, a psychological masterpiece. Promise eternal joy for compliance and eternal torture for doubt, and you can control almost anyone. That mechanism still works today, wrapped in new rituals, but driven by the same fear of uncertainty. Religions also offered identity. They told people who they were, where they came from, and who their enemies should be. Shared myths united tribes, but they also divided humanity. Every group believed its version of truth was sacred, and everyone else's was dangerous. Faith created belonging and hostility in equal measure. The same systems that comforted people also justified conquest, slavery, and exclusion. It's not that religion was created purely with evil intent. It was created out of necessity. Early humans needed structure, a shared code that kept societies from collapsing. When you tell people that a god is watching, even when no one else is, you discourage theft, murder, and betrayal. It was a social technology, an ancient moral software running on the hardware of fear and hope. But like all technologies, once invented, it was exploited. Those who could interpret the will of the gods controlled those who couldn't. History shows this pattern repeating endlessly. In ancient Egypt, pharaohs declared themselves divine to justify their rule. In medieval Europe, monarchs ruled by divine right, using religion to silence rebellion. Even in modern times, leaders invoke faith to gain legitimacy, to mask political agendas in sacred language. When people stop questioning, power hides behind holiness. Religions evolved with culture, adapting to each era's fears. When humanity didn't understand disease, gods punished sinners with plagues. When we discovered germs, divine wrath turned into moral tests. When we understood the universe was vast and old, creation stories were reinterpreted to fit the evidence. The pattern never changes. Religion bends reality to preserve belief. But perhaps the most revealing truth is psychological. Humans crave meaning. We cannot stand the idea that life might be random, that existence has no built-in purpose. Religion gave meaning in bulk, pre-packaged narratives of destiny, morality, and eternal life. It told us we were chosen, watched over, loved unconditionally, and that suffering wasn't meaningless. It's a comforting illusion, but still an illusion. Science replaced myth not because it was emotionally stronger, but because it worked. It cured diseases that prayer couldn't. It predicted eclipses better than prophecy. It built machines, medicines, and technologies that reshaped the planet, none of it achieved through divine revelation. Yet, despite all that progress, religion persists. Not because it's true, but because it satisfies emotional needs logic cannot. People want comfort more than truth. The idea of a cosmic parent watching over them is far easier to bear than the idea of a cold, indifferent universe. Another reason religion endures is ritual. Human brains are wired for repetition and community. Rituals bind people through shared rhythm and emotion, chanting, singing, fasting, feasting. They create unity and belonging that transcend reason. Even when belief fades, the emotional imprint of ritual remains. Religion doesn't survive on logic, it survives on longing. If you trace all belief systems back to their roots, they tell the same story in different words. Humans terrified of mortality trying to bargain with the universe. Every prayer, every sacrifice, every temple is a declaration of fear. Fear of death, fear of meaninglessness, fear of being forgotten. Religion offered an escape from those fears, but at the cost of honesty. Instead of confronting reality, humanity chose comfort. And yet, there's something profoundly human in that. The same imagination that invented gods also built mathematics, music, and art. The desire to find meaning in chaos created both religion and science. One stopped at belief, the other kept going. Religion gave us myths, curiosity gave us knowledge. The difference is courage, the willingness to face truth without needing it to flatter us. If we look closely, the creation of religion was not the birth of wisdom, but the beginning of self-deception on a global scale. It replaced understanding with obedience, inquiry with worship, and individuality with submission. It taught people that virtue means believing without evidence, a lesson that still weakens minds today. The greatest power religion ever had was convincing people that questioning it is a sin. But questioning is the very thing that made humanity evolve. Every breakthrough, every freedom, every scientific discovery came from someone who refused to accept inherited answers. Progress begins where dogma ends. So why were religions created? Because humans needed comfort, control, and community. Because we feared chaos more than we valued truth. Because it's easier to build stories than to face uncertainty. But understanding this doesn't mean rejecting wonder. It means reclaiming it. The universe doesn't need divine authorship to be extraordinary. Existence itself is already miraculous enough, not because someone made it, but because it is. The first humans created gods to explain the world. The next generations can honor truth by explaining the gods. And maybe that's how we finally grow beyond them, not by replacing one belief with another, but by learning to stand in awe of reality without inventing someone to own it.